The groom slapped his bride in front of everyone, but he had no idea what was coming next. Stay tuned, subscribe, and let us know where you're watching from. Now, let's dive into this unbelievable story. Maya Caldwell had spent the past decade making a name for herself in New York City, becoming one of the most sought-after plastic surgeons in Manhattan's elite medical scene. Her clients included Oscar-winning actors, tech moguls, and high-profile politicians, each trusting her with their most delicate transformations. Her clinic, known for its exclusivity and discretion, was booked months in advance, serving only those who moved in the highest circles. Maya's skill wasn't the only reason for her success. Her unwavering professionalism and ability to navigate the intricate web of high society had set her apart. In a world where status was measured by box office numbers, Forbes rankings, and reservations at the most exclusive restaurants, she had carved out her place. But no matter how much she accomplished, she could never escape a certain unspoken reality. She was always seen as an outsider. Despite her success, there was always a quiet undertone of surprise in how people acknowledged her, as if she were an exception rather than the standard. And then she met Julian Whitmore. It was at a prestigious gala for the Film Industry Inclusion Initiative, a fundraiser attended by the very people who often spoke about change while resisting it behind closed doors. Julian had approached her near the silent auction, exuding an effortless charm, his confidence magnetic. Julian was the youngest son of Everett Whitmore, a legendary film producer whose name was tied to some of Hollywood's most successful and controversial movies. His father had built an empire producing films that claimed to tell authentic black stories, though always through the lens of a white savior narrative. The Whitmore family had power, influence, and an undeniable grip on the industry. But Julian seemed different, or so she had thought. He was well-educated, articulate, and spoke passionately about reshaping Hollywood, about moving away from the same tired stereotypes that had long plagued black representation in film. He had a way of making Maya feel seen, as if he truly understood the barriers she had shattered to reach where she was. Within months, their whirlwind romance became the talk of the town. Their first public appearance as a couple sparked mixed reactions. On the surface, the industry celebrated them, a powerful interracial couple, the very symbol of progress. But behind the glossy magazine covers and perfectly curated Instagram posts, Maya started noticing the microaggressions. People would call her stunning, but there was always something in their tone, a hint of shock, as if they hadn't expected someone like her to be so successful and desirable. At industry events, she was introduced as Julian's fiancée first, her own career accomplishments treated as an afterthought. And of course, the Whitmore family had their own agenda. At first, Maya believed they were genuinely welcoming her into their world. Everett, though an intimidating figure, had been charming and quick to joke about how lucky his son was. His wife, Vivian Whitmore, was the epitome of a polished socialite, inviting Maya to charity luncheons, offering to help plan the wedding, and always ensuring Maya was visible at high-profile gatherings. But the more time Maya spent with them, the more she realized she wasn't being embraced as family. She was being paraded as proof of progress. She was invited to exclusive industry gatherings, strategically seated next to studio executives who wanted to be seen discussing diversity and inclusion. They would lean in with smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes, saying things like, "Hollywood needs more voices like yours," while simultaneously pulling funding from projects that elevated black creators. It became painfully clear that to them, Maya was not a woman. She was an asset, a carefully placed symbol to serve their image, and the engagement only amplified that. The official announcement was a spectacle. High-gloss, professionally shot photos were released to every major media outlet, showcasing Maya and Julian on a private vineyard estate in Sonoma, bathed in golden light, looking effortlessly glamorous. The headlines followed the same script. Hollywood royalty meets brilliance. Julian Whitmore to wed powerhouse black surgeon. The marriage that will change Hollywood forever. But what stood out the most wasn't how they described Maya. It was how they shaped the entire story around what she represented, not who she actually was. Articles about the engagement weren't really about Maya Caldwell. They weren't about her career, her achievements, or even their love story. The media had turned her relationship with Julian Whitmore into a PR campaign, a carefully crafted symbol of diversity and progress in Hollywood. She wasn't just a bride-to-be, she was an image, a narrative that benefited the Whitmore family's reputation. She tried to tell herself it didn't matter. She loved Julian. He was different from his family. He had reassured her that he wanted to build something real, something that had nothing to do with his father's carefully orchestrated world. So when he got down on one knee at the film producer's annual gala in front of a star-studded crowd, she said yes. The ring, a breathtaking custom design from Van Clein & Co., glittered under the flash of 100 cameras. The audience erupted in applause, and in that moment, she pushed aside the creeping doubts. But deep down, she knew. She had seen Everett Whitmore's knowing glance toward a studio executive, as if sealing a silent business deal. She had heard Vivian Whitmore telling a journalist how thrilled she was to welcome a strong, intelligent black woman into their family, like Maya was some carefully selected acquisition. Yet she convinced herself that love would be enough. But as the wedding day approached, the pressure became unbearable. The Whitmores took over everything: the venue, the guest list, the press coverage. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a global event. Every detail was curated to perfection, as if their marriage was just another film production. The more they controlled, the more Maya felt herself slipping away. And Julian started changing too. The charming, progressive man she had fallen in love with became short-tempered, impatient, cold. In private, he would snap at her, dismiss her concerns, only to turn on his signature smile in public. When she told him she was uncomfortable with how his family was using their wedding for PR, he brushed it off. "You're overthinking, babe." The first time he grabbed her wrist too hard during an argument, she froze. He apologized immediately. "I'm just stressed." She wanted to believe him. And now, standing before the grand mirror in her suite at the Palace Regent Hotel, she felt something she never expected: fear. Not fear of marriage. Not fear of the cameras, but fear of the man she was about to marry. A sharp knock on the door startled her. Danielle Vaughn, her best friend, burst into the room, kicking off her designer heels with an exhausted sigh. "Traffic is insane," she muttered, flopping onto the velvet chaise lounge. But then she noticed Maya's rigid posture, the way she clutched the delicate lace sleeve of her gown. Danielle's voice softened. "Maya? Are you sure about this?" Maya opened her mouth, but before she could answer, another knock came. This time it was Vivian Whitmore. "Darling," she said, stepping inside with her usual poised smile, "it's time to go over the final details. The lawyers need you to sign a few last-minute adjustments to the prenup." Maya felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She had ignored the warning signs for too long, and tomorrow, in front of Hollywood's most powerful figures, she would come to regret it. She adjusted her diamond earring and took one last look at herself in the mirror. The suite was lavish, a display of excessive wealth that had become her new normal over the past few months. Her evening gown, a custom design, handpicked by Vivian Whitmore herself, clung to her figure. It was stunning. But she couldn't help but notice how much it resembled the old Hollywood glamour Vivian adored. Every detail of this wedding had been designed to fit the Whitmore legacy. The rehearsal dinner was being held at the Whitmore estate in Brentwood, and it wasn't just a gathering of close friends and family. It was an exclusive, invitation-only event, filled with Hollywood's most elite executives, producers, and political figures. Maya should have been excited. Instead, she felt like she couldn't breathe. Danielle, already dressed in an elegant black gown, stood by the window, scrolling through her phone. "You saw the guest list, right?" she asked without looking up. Maya didn't answer. "I'm just saying." Danielle finally turned to face her. "Why is it that every single person coming tonight is either a studio head, a producer, or a politician? I thought this was supposed to be a wedding dinner, not a networking event." Maya already knew where this was going. She forced a smile. "It's just one night." But she wasn't sure if she was trying to convince Danielle or herself. Danielle sighed, her tone quieter now. "Look, I get that Julian is a big deal, and yeah, you'll be part of the Whitmore dynasty. But doesn't it bother you that your family and friends make up, 10% of the guest list?" Maya didn't answer right away. Instead, She turned back to the mirror and forced a smile. "It's just one night," she said. But she wasn't sure if she was trying to convince Danielle or herself. Danielle didn't push further, but the look on her face said enough. They left the hotel in one of the sleek black cars arranged by the Whitmore family. The ride to the estate was silent, the glow of the city lights blurring past the window. Maya wanted to believe Danielle was overreacting, but deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The Whitmore estate in Brentwood was a fortress of wealth and prestige, a sprawling mansion with marble floors, grand chandeliers, and walls lined with priceless art. The moment Maya stepped inside, she felt the weight of 100 scrutinizing eyes. The air was thick with power, the kind built on silent deals and unspoken alliances. Vivian Whitmore was the first to greet her, elegantly draped in an emerald green gown, her diamond bracelet catching the light as she extended a perfectly manicured hand. "Darling, you look exquisite," Vivian said smoothly, but there was something calculated in her expression. Maya forced a polite smile. "Thank you." Nearby, Everett Whitmore was deep in conversation with the senator. He barely acknowledged Maya as she passed, offering only a brief nod of approval. This was her introduction into their world. The final test before she was fully absorbed into the Whitmore name. She spotted Julian near the bar, already deep in conversation with a renowned director. He was always effortlessly charming, moving through a room like he belonged there. Because he did. His father had molded him for this life. But the moment he saw her, something in his expression shifted. She had seen that look before. He made his way toward her, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "You're late," he murmured, leaning in so only she could hear. Maya blinked, caught off guard by his tone. It was only a few minutes. His fingers pressed against her waist, too firm, too controlling. "You know how important tonight is." Maya inhaled sharply but didn't react. Instead, she plastered on a perfect smile. "Of course," she said smoothly. "Shall we mingle?" Julian hesitated for a second before relaxing his grip. To anyone watching, it would have looked like a simple exchange between an engaged couple. But Maya felt the warning. The dinner was just as extravagant as she had expected. Course after course of gourmet dishes. Endless champagne. Conversations dripping with polite deception. Maya sat beside Julian, listening to yet another executive drone on about their latest project, when she noticed Danielle at the far end of the table. Her best friend had been keeping her distance, but her concern was obvious. Then came the moment that changed everything. One of the older producers, a longtime family friend of the Whitmores, leaned in with a smirk. "So, Maya," he said, swirling his wine, "are you nervous about tomorrow?" Maya smiled politely. "Excited, mostly," he chuckled. "Well, you know what they say, Hollywood marriages last about as long as a box office flop." The men around the table laughed. Maya felt her jaw tighten. Danielle, seated nearby, cleared her throat. "I think we can all agree, Maya and Julian aren't your typical Hollywood couple," she said pointedly. "Oh, of course," the producer said, still smirking. Then he leaned back in his chair. "It's just that, let's be honest, this is a bit of a PR dream, isn't it?" The laughter faltered slightly. The room tensed. Maya raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me? I mean, look at the optics." The man continued, his tone casual. "A Whitmore marrying a brilliant black woman? It's the perfect image for the industry right now. The diversity push. The new era of Hollywood." Maya's stomach twisted. She expected Julian to say something, to shut it down, but he only smirked, sipping his drink. Something inside her cracked. Maya's voice was calm, but ice cold. "So let me get this straight. You think my relationship is some kind of marketing strategy?" The man shrugged. "It doesn't hurt, does it?" Before she could respond, Julian's hand clamped around her arm under the table, hard. Her breath hitched. She turned to look at him. His expression was carefully blank. "We don't need to turn this into a debate," he murmured. "Let's just enjoy the night." Maya stared at him. He wasn't embarrassed. He wasn't angry at the comment. He was angry at her for responding. A sinking feeling settled in her chest. Danielle stood abruptly. "Excuse me," she muttered, throwing her napkin onto the table. Maya followed her lead. "I think I need some air." They stepped onto the balcony. Danielle turned to her immediately. "Tell me you saw that? Tell me you saw him." Maya exhaled shakily. "I saw it." She didn't say anything else, because for the first time, she wasn't sure what to say. Inside, Julian kept laughing with the others, as if nothing had happened. As if he hadn't just squeezed her arm so tightly it left a mark. As if he hadn't just let that conversation happen. And Maya realized something chilling. She had spent months ignoring the warning signs, convincing herself that Julian was different from his family. But now, standing outside that grand dining hall, she wasn't so sure anymore. Julian's hand clamped around Maya's arm under the table, hard. Her breath hitched. She turned to look at him, but his face remained carefully blank. "We don't need to turn this into a debate," he murmured. "Let's just enjoy the night." Maya stared at him. He wasn't embarrassed. He wasn't angry at the comment. He was angry at her for responding. A pit formed in her stomach. Danielle abruptly pushed back her chair. "Excuse me," she muttered, throwing her napkin onto the table. Maya followed. "I think I need some air." They stepped onto the balcony, where the cool night air did little to settle Maya's nerves. Danielle turned to her immediately. "Tell me you saw that. Tell me you saw him." Maya exhaled shakily. "I saw it." She didn't say anything else, because for the first time, she wasn't sure what to say. Inside, Julian kept laughing with the others, as if nothing had happened. As if he hadn't just squeezed her arm so tightly it left a mark. As if he hadn't just let that conversation happen. And in that moment, Maya realized something chilling. She had spent months ignoring the warnings, convincing herself that Julian was different from his family. But now, standing outside that grand dining hall, she wasn't sure anymore. Maya woke the next morning with a dull ache in her arm. She rolled up the sleeve of her nightgown. A bruise was forming just beneath the surface. Last night's events played on a loop in her mind. The producer's condescending smirk, the laughter of the guests, the pressure of Julian's hand pressing into her skin like a silent warning. The pit in her stomach hadn't gone away. She sat up in bed, wrapping her arms around herself. Outside her suite at the Palace Regent Hotel, the city shimmered under the morning light. It was supposed to be her wedding day. A knock at the door startled her. Danielle stepped inside, still in her silk robe, a coffee cup in hand. One look at Maya's face and her expression darkened. "You barely slept," Danielle said. Maya shook her head. "I couldn't." Danielle sat beside her, setting the coffee down. "Maya, we need to talk about what happened last night." Maya exhaled. "I know." Danielle reached for her arm, gently rolling up the sleeve. The faint outline of Julian's fingers was already darkening into a bruise. Danielle swore under her breath. "This isn't okay," she said firmly. Maya swallowed hard. "I know," she admitted, but then she hesitated. "If I leave now," Danielle's expression hardened, "they'll bury you." Maya didn't need to ask who they were. The Whitmore family weren't just a Hollywood dynasty. They were a brand, a corporation, a legacy. They had the money, the connections, and the influence to erase anything or anyone who threatened them. If she walked away now, they would make sure she was the one left ruined. Not Julian. Maya ran a hand through her hair. "They'll spin it. Say I got cold feet, that I was the problem." "They won't just spin it," Danielle corrected. "They'll destroy you." Maya shuddered. As if summoned by thought alone, another knock sounded at the door. She and Danielle exchanged a glance before Maya stood, hesitantly opening it. Vivian Whitmore stood there, perfectly composed. She wore an ivory dress that screamed elegance. In her hand, she held a slim leather folder. "Good morning, darling," Vivian said smoothly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Danielle straightened, crossing her arms. Vivian barely acknowledged her. "I wanted to speak with you privately before the ceremony," she continued, placing the folder down on the desk near the window. "There are just a few final things to go over." Maya stared at her. "Final things?" Vivian gave a tight, knowing smile. "Legalities." Maya's stomach turned as she glanced at the folder. She already knew what this was. The prenup. Vivian confirmed it with an elegant nod. "Just a few last-minute adjustments." Danielle scoffed. "Last-minute adjustments? On the morning of the wedding?" Vivian ignored her. "Everett's attorneys added a few additional clauses regarding asset protection," she said delicately. "Nothing out of the ordinary." Maya knew better. Everything about this was calculated. The Whitmore family had spent years crafting airtight contracts that protected their fortune, ensuring that no one, not a wife, a business partner, or even their own family, could ever take what was theirs. Maya hesitated before opening the folder. The pages inside were dense with legal jargon, but a few lines stood out immediately. If she divorced Julian, she would receive nothing. No alimony, no property rights, no stake in any shared assets. If she spoke publicly about their marriage, she would be financially liable for defamation. If she attempted to press charges against him for any form of abuse, she would be bound by mandatory arbitration, controlled by Whitmore-appointed mediators. Maya's blood ran cold. This wasn't a prenup. It was a trap. She set the papers down carefully. This is different from what I originally agreed to. Vivian tilted her head, her smile never wavering. It's simply a formality, darling. Maya met her future mother-in-law's gaze. And what happens if I don't sign it? For the first time, Vivian's mask cracked. Just for a second. Then she sighed. Maya, we both know that wouldn't be in your best interest. Danielle took a step forward. Are you threatening her? Vivian exhaled, amused. Of course not. But they all knew the truth. If Maya refused to sign, they would destroy her. The Whitmore family would blacklist her, smear her name in the press, and make sure she was seen as unstable and difficult. The media would side with them. Hollywood would close its doors. Maya thought about the producer who had laughed at dinner, the way they spoke about her relationship as if it were a marketing strategy. She thought about how silent Julian had been. Her hands curled into fists. She forced herself to take a deep breath before looking Vivian in the eye. I need time to read this carefully. Vivian's expression flickered with irritation. Of course, she said, but the ceremony is in a few hours, so don't take too long. She turned gracefully, exiting the suite with the same polished elegance she had entered with. The moment the door closed, Danielle exploded. Are you kidding me, Maya? This isn't just a bad contract. This is a goddamn prison. Maya rubbed her temples. I know. Danielle's voice softened. So what are you going to do? Maya turned toward the window, staring out at the city below. The Whitmore family wanted to break her before she even walked down the aisle. But they had underestimated something. Maya Caldwell had never been the kind of woman to be owned. And if they thought she was going to stay quiet, they had no idea what was coming. If she accused him of abuse, she would be forced into mandatory arbitration, overseen by Whitmore-appointed mediators. Maya's blood ran cold. This wasn't a prenup. It was a cage. She set the papers down carefully. This is different from what I originally agreed to. Vivian tilted her head, her smile never wavering. It's simply a formality, darling. Maya met her future mother-in-law's gaze. And what happens if I don't sign it? For the first time, Vivian's mask cracked. Just for a second. Then she sighed, as if dealing with a stubborn child. Maya, we both know that wouldn't be in your best interest. Danielle took a step forward. Are you threatening her? Vivian exhaled, looking amused. Of course not, but they all knew the truth. If Maya refused to sign, they would destroy her. The Whitmore family would use their power to blacklist her, smear her name in the press, and make sure she was seen as difficult, unstable, and unreliable. The media would side with them. Hollywood would close its doors. Maya thought about the producers who had laughed last night, the way they had spoken about her relationship as if it were a marketing strategy. She thought about Julian's silence. Her hands curled into fists. She forced herself to take a deep breath before looking Vivian in the eye. I need time to read this carefully. Vivian's expression flickered with irritation. Of course, she said, smoothing down the front of her dress. But the ceremony is in a few hours, so don't take too long. She turned gracefully, exiting the suite with the same polished elegance she had entered with. The moment the door closed, Danielle exploded. Are you kidding me, Maya? This isn't just a bad contract, this is a goddamn trap. Maya rubbed her temples. I know. Danielle's voice softened. So what are you going to do? Maya inhaled shakily. She had two choices. She could sign the prenup, go through with the wedding and become Mrs. Julian Whitmore, a perfect, obedient wife with no escape. Or she could walk away, leave the wedding, leave the Whitmore name, leave the life she had been preparing for. But if she did that, she wouldn't just be walking away from Julian. She would be walking into war. Danielle's voice softened. Maya, you can't do this. Maya turned toward the window, staring out at the city below. The Whitmore family wanted to break her before she even walked down the aisle. But they had underestimated one thing. Maya Caldwell had never been the kind of woman to be owned. And if they thought she was going to stay quiet, they had no idea what was coming. Maya stood at the window of her suite, her fingers gripping the silk curtain as she watched the city move below her. Behind her, the prenup sat untouched on the desk, its presence suffocating like the walls closing in around her. Danielle paced across the room, the anger in her movements barely contained. "You're not seriously thinking about signing that, are you?" Maya exhaled, her eyes still fixed on the skyline. "If I don't, they'll destroy me." Danielle scoffed. "Maya, they're already trying to destroy you. That contract is proof." She wasn't wrong. The Whitmore family had spent years perfecting the art of control. Every clause in that prenup had been designed to trap Maya, to keep her silent, to ensure that no matter what happened in her marriage, she could never fight back. Maya turned to face her best friend. "If I walk away now, I need a plan. I can't just leave and let them paint me as some unstable woman who couldn't handle the pressure." Danielle folded her arms. "So, what do we do?" Maya's mind was already racing. Julian's outburst at the rehearsal dinner, the laughter of the guests, the producer's words. This is a PR dream. This had never been about love. It had always been about image. The Whitmore family had found a way to use her, to elevate their reputation under the guise of progressiveness. And now, they wanted to ensure she never had the power to change the narrative. But what if she did? Maya's heart pounded as the idea took shape. "We find out everything," she said. "Every dirty secret they don't want the world to know." Danielle's eyes widened. "You want to take them down?" Maya nodded slowly. "If they want to bury me, they need to understand I bury back." Danielle didn't hesitate. She was already making calls before they even left the hotel. She had contacts, journalists, publicists, private investigators, people who knew the ins and outs of Hollywood's darkest corners. Maya knew that if she was going to do this, she had to start at the top. And that meant going after the most powerful family in the industry. The first person Maya reached out to was Ethan Cole, an independent film producer known for his exposés on Hollywood corruption. For years, he had documented how powerful executives protected abusers, how contracts were manipulated, scandals buried, and careers destroyed. He answered on the second ring. "Maya Caldwell," he said, his voice carrying the weight of curiosity. "Didn't think I'd ever hear from you." Maya glanced at Danielle before speaking. "I need your help." There was a pause. "Then meet me at the Lenox in an hour." Ethan was already waiting when Maya and Danielle arrived at the hotel's private lounge. He was younger than most producers in the industry, but what he lacked in decades of experience, he made up for in sheer tenacity. His documentaries had led to lawsuits, resignations, even a few arrests. He leaned forward as Maya slid into the booth across from him. "I take it this has something to do with your fiancé?" Maya met his gaze. "And his family." Ethan smirked. "I had a feeling something about that marriage didn't add up." He took a sip of his drink. "The Whitmores are very good at making people disappear." Maya stiffened. "Disappear?" He nodded. "Not in the literal sense, but careers, reputations, businesses. If you cross them, you might as well be erased from Hollywood." Maya already knew this, but hearing it out loud made it feel real. Danielle cut in. "We need information, everything you know about them, and we need it fast." Ethan tapped his fingers on the table, considering. "That depends. Are you looking for dirt on Julian, or the whole empire?" Maya didn't hesitate. "Both." Ethan let out a low whistle. "That's a dangerous game." Maya's voice was steady. "I don't care." Ethan studied her for a long moment before nodding. "All right, let's start with Julian." The deeper Maya dug, the uglier the truth became. Ethan had sources, former assistants, ex-girlfriends, industry insiders who had seen the Whitmore family operate up close. The pattern was clear. Julian had a history of violence. Several of his exes had experienced the same temper Maya had seen in him, but they had been silenced through NDAs, hush money, or sheer fear. One of them, Lena Carter, had been an aspiring actress when she dated him. When she tried to speak out, her career mysteriously crumbled. She was blacklisted, Ethan explained. Nobody would cast her. Nobody would hire her. Overnight, she went from a rising star to completely invisible. Maya's stomach churned. And then there was Everett Whitmore. Ethan's research into the patriarch of the family revealed a web of financial crimes, cover-ups, and harassment allegations stretching back decades. His production company had a history of exploiting black talent, offering roles that were either degrading stereotypes or positioning white actors as the heroes of the narrative. But it got worse. Several young actresses had accused him of coercion. None of the cases had ever gone public. They make problems disappear, Ethan said grimly, just like they're trying to do with you. Maya exhaled, staring down at the files spread across the table. She had spent so long convincing herself that Julian was different, that his family's legacy didn't define him. She had been wrong. Danielle leaned in. So, what's the plan? Maya met her best friend's eyes. We make sure the world sees everything. Because if the Whitmore family thought they could silence her, they were about to learn otherwise. Maya knew she had little time. The Whitmore family was powerful, connected, ruthless. If she wanted to take them down, she had to move quickly, before they realized what she was planning, before they could silence her like they had so many others. Back at the Palace Regent, Maya sat on the couch with Danielle, reviewing everything Ethan had uncovered. The files, the testimonies, the financial reports. It was a damning collection of evidence. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. Ethan had warned her, Hollywood would protect its own. If she wanted to bring the Whitmores down, she needed something bigger, something undeniable, something that would shatter their influence completely. Maya pressed her fingers to her temples. We need more. Danielle frowned. More? She gestured to the stacks of documents spread across the coffee table. Maya, this is already enough to ruin them. Legally? Maybe, Maya admitted, but in Hollywood, they'll spin it. They'll say these are just bitter exes, people with an agenda. The media will protect them unless we have something. Irrefutable, Danielle finished sighing. Exactly. Danielle folded her arms. So what do you suggest? Maya's mind raced. Julian's outburst at the rehearsal dinner, the laughter of the guests, the producer's words. This is a PR dream. This had never been about love. It had always been about image. The Whitmore family had found a way to use her, to elevate their reputation under the guise of progressiveness. And now they wanted to ensure she never had the power to change the narrative. But what if she did? Maya's heart pounded as the idea took shape. We need someone on the inside, she said. Someone who worked for them, someone with access to everything. Danielle's eyes widened. You're serious? Maya nodded. If they want to bury me, they need to understand I'd bury back. Danielle was already making calls before they even left the hotel. She had contacts, journalists, publicists, private investigators, people who knew the ins and outs of Hollywood's darkest corners. Maya knew that, if she was going to do this, she had to start at the top. And that meant getting inside the Whitmore empire. Danielle pursed her lips, then reached for her phone. I might know someone. 30 minutes later, her contact agreed to meet. Her name was Sophia Morales, a former executive assistant at Whitmore Studios. She had worked directly under Everett Whitmore for nearly 5 years before quitting suddenly. Maya and Danielle met Sophia at a small, out-of-the-way cafe in Silver Lake, the kind of place where prying eyes wouldn't recognize them. Sophia arrived in oversized sunglasses and a hooded sweatshirt, her posture tense as she slid into the booth across from them. She didn't order anything. I don't know why I agreed to this, she muttered, glancing around. If anyone finds out I'm talking to you, they won't. Maya reassured her. We just need the truth. Sophia let out a bitter laugh. The truth? The truth is, I wasted 5 years of my life protecting a monster. Maya and Danielle exchanged a glance. Sophia leaned in. I assume you already know about the NDAs, the settlements. Maya nodded. We do, but we need something concrete, something that can't be dismissed. Sophia hesitated. Then, after a long pause, she took a deep breath. There's a hard drive, she said finally. Maya's heart pounded. Everett kept everything, emails, videos, financial records. He thought he was untouchable. He has backup stored in his private office at the studio. Maya's pulse raced. Where? Sophia exhaled. It's not somewhere you can just walk into. It's in his executive suite, locked behind a biometric security system. Only a few people have access. Maya clenched her fists. Including Julian? Sophia hesitated. Then she nodded. Yes, Julian has clearance. Maya sat back, her mind spinning. If she could get inside that office, she could end this. That night, back at her hotel suite, Maya stood at the window, staring out at the glittering Los Angeles skyline. She knew what she had to do. She would get the hard drive. She would expose the Whitmores. And when it was over, they would never silence another woman again. Maya felt the walls closing in around her. Every move she made, every conversation she had, she could sense the invisible presence of the Whitmores watching her. It was only a matter of time before they caught wind of what she was planning. That time came sooner than expected. The next morning, Maya awoke to find an unmarked envelope slipped under the door of her hotel suite. Danielle, who had been staying with her for safety, was the first to see it. "Maya," she said sharply, bending down to pick it up, "you need to see this." Maya took the envelope, already feeling a cold weight settle in her stomach. She tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a printed-out email, an internal memo from the medical board, discussing an upcoming investigation into Caldwell Aesthetics, her clinic, an investigation that had not existed yesterday. Danielle swore under her breath. "They're coming for your career." Maya swallowed hard. "I knew they would." "This is just the start," Danielle muttered, pacing. "They're going to keep applying pressure until you fold." Maya wasn't so sure. The Whitmore family was making moves, but they weren't public. They weren't addressing her directly. That meant they still thought they could intimidate her into silence. That meant she still had power. Her phone buzzed. A message. "Julian, we need to talk. Meet me for lunch." Maya stared at the screen, her heart pounding. She hesitated for a long moment before typing a response. "Fine. Noon. Sterling Hotel." Danielle frowned. "You're meeting him?" Maya exhaled. "I need to know what he knows." The Sterling Hotel was the kind of place where celebrities went to disappear. Tucked away behind lush greenery, it was private, exclusive, perfect for conversations no one else was supposed to hear. When Maya arrived, Julian was already waiting at a corner table on the patio. He wore an expensive suit, his expression unreadable as she approached. "Maya," he said smoothly as she took her seat. "You look beautiful." She didn't respond. He sighed, setting his glass down. "I know you're upset." Maya raised an eyebrow. "You hit me, Julian, in a room full of people." His jaw tightened. "It was a mistake." She let out a short, humorless laugh. "A mistake?" He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under, the expectations. My father—" "Don't," she cut in. "Don't make this about him. You had a choice." His nostrils flared, but he forced a smile. "Maya, you—" But she had already made up her mind. "You need to stop whatever it is you're doing." Maya tilted her head. "And what exactly am I doing?" Julian exhaled through his nose. "Don't play games with me. You think I don't know about Ethan Cole? About Sophia Morales?" Maya's stomach flipped, but she kept her expression neutral. "You're making a mistake," Julian continued. "This doesn't end well for you." She folded her hands on the table. "For me?" He nodded. "My family." He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "We don't lose. If you keep pushing, they will make sure you regret it." There it was. The threat. Maya leaned in, lowering her voice to match his. "Your family might not lose, Julian, but you do." His expression flickered. "Because here's the thing," she continued. "Your father, he's untouchable. Sure. But you're different." Her voice remained steady. "You're reckless, sloppy. You don't have his control, his patience. You make mistakes." She saw it in his eyes then. Realization. Maya wasn't scared of him anymore. For the first time, he was the one feeling cornered. Julian sat back, his jaw tightening. "You're making a big mistake, Maya." She picked up her purse, standing. "So are you." Then she walked away, leaving him sitting there, gripping his glass so tightly his knuckles turned white. That night, the threats escalated. When Maya and Danielle returned to the hotel, there was another envelope waiting. This time, inside was a single photograph. Danielle, taken earlier that day outside a coffee shop. She was completely unaware, caught mid-conversation with someone, but the message was clear. Danielle paled. "Maya." Maya clenched her fists. "They're trying to scare us." Danielle looked at her, eyes wide. "It's working." Maya took a breath. "We have to move faster." The Whitmore family thought they could control the narrative. They were wrong. Because now, Maya wasn't just playing defense. She was going to take them down before they even saw it coming. Maya had always known the Whitmores were ruthless, but the threats, the intimidation tactics, the sudden investigation into her clinic, it confirmed what she had feared the most. They weren't just trying to silence her, they wanted to destroy her. But she had spent too many years building herself up to let them tear her down. It was time to fight back. Ethan's team had been working around the clock, piecing together every bit of evidence, every hidden truth they had uncovered about the Whitmores. The film wasn't just about Julian, or even about his abuse. It was bigger than that. It was about a dynasty built on lies, manipulation, and the systemic suppression of anyone who dared to challenge them. And now, it was ready. Maya sat in a dimly lit office at Ethan's production company, watching the final cut on a large monitor. The documentary, titled Hollywood Conspiracy, was an unflinching exposé. It opened with a montage of the Whitmores' biggest successes: award-winning films, red carpet appearances, Everett Whitmore shaking hands with powerful politicians. And then the unraveling began. Julian's history of violence, backed by testimonies from multiple women. Everett's shady financial dealings exposed through leaked documents and former employees speaking out. Vivian's behind-the-scenes control, manipulating young actresses and executives into silence. And then, the moment that would shatter everything. The rehearsal dinner footage. Ethan had managed to obtain a recording from one of the waitstaff. A shaky but clear video. Julian striking Maya in front of a room full of Hollywood elites. The audio captured everything. The stunned silence. The way people looked away. The quiet complicity of the industry. It was damning. It was undeniable. And in just a few hours, the world would see it. Ethan turned to Maya. "Are you sure about this?" She met his gaze. "I've never been more sure of anything." The film went live at midnight. Ethan's team had orchestrated a multi-platform release. It was uploaded to every major streaming site, sent to journalists, leaked to social media. Within minutes, it was spreading like wildfire. By 3 a.m., Hollywood Conspiracy was trending worldwide. By 6 a.m., the first statements from the Whitmore PR team were released. Vague, dismissive, carefully crafted damage control. By noon, the cracks were showing. Major news outlets picked up the story, playing clips from the film in every headline. The footage of Julian hitting Maya played on a loop, a visual testament to the kind of power Hollywood had protected for so long. And then, the dominoes began to fall. A-list celebrities who had once aligned themselves with the Whitmores began distancing themselves. Major studios announced they were re-evaluating their partnerships with Whitmore Studios. Major studios began re-evaluating their partnerships with Whitmore Studios as the fallout from Hollywood Conspiracy spread like wildfire. Maya sat in Danielle's apartment, watching the coverage unfold, her phone buzzing relentlessly with messages from reporters asking for interviews, lawyers offering representation, and people she hadn't heard from in years reaching out in support. But the biggest blow came that afternoon. The Whitmores had always controlled the media. But now the media was turning against them. A bombshell report from a major news network confirmed everything Maya and Ethan had exposed. Multiple women had come forward against Julian, the LAPD had opened an investigation, and Everett Whitmore, once seen as untouchable, was now under federal scrutiny for financial fraud. And Vivian Whitmore, the ever-poised matriarch who had orchestrated so much from behind the scenes, had gone completely silent. No carefully worded PR statements, no damage control, just silence. It was over. Maya exhaled, setting her phone down. Danielle sat beside her, shaking her head in disbelief. "You did it." Maya leaned back against the couch, exhaustion settling in. "We did it." But she knew it wasn't truly over. This was just the beginning. The Whitmores would fight back, they would try to rebuild, to reclaim their power. But for the first time in decades, they weren't the ones controlling the narrative. And Maya would make sure they never did again. She woke to the sound of her phone vibrating relentlessly on the bedside table. It was still dark outside, but Los Angeles never slept, and neither did the fallout from the documentary. She blinked against the dim glow of the screen, seeing dozens of missed calls and unread messages. Danielle stirred beside her on the couch, rubbing her eyes. "More reporters?" Maya exhaled, scrolling through the flood of notifications. Not just reporters, lawyers, industry executives, people I haven't spoken to in years. She held up her phone, showing Danielle the overwhelming response. "It's happening, they're crumbling." Danielle sat up. "Turn on the news." They switched on the television just in time to catch the morning broadcast. The footage rolling across the screen was surreal. Everett Whitmore, the Hollywood legend himself, caught entering a federal building flanked by his attorneys. Vivian Whitmore emerging from their Brentwood estate, her usual polished composure replaced with tight-lipped fury as reporters shouted questions at her. And Julian Whitmore, nowhere to be seen. The news anchors were relentless. The once powerful Whitmore family faces an unprecedented scandal, with allegations ranging from financial fraud to domestic abuse. Julian Whitmore, heir to the dynasty, is now under criminal investigation following the release of damning footage in the viral documentary Hollywood Conspiracy. Maya felt a strange, eerie calm settle over her. She had spent so long fearing their power, dreading what they might do to her if she spoke out. But now, for the first time, she wasn't the one on the defensive. The Whitmores were. Danielle grinned. "Do you realize what you've done?" Maya nodded. "Yeah." She took a breath, but it's not over yet. By midday, the legal floodgates had burst open. Julian Whitmore's attorneys released a statement, calling the video of him striking Maya at the rehearsal dinner a moment of emotional distress, and accusing her of trying to capitalize on private matters for personal gain. Maya let out a short, bitter laugh when she read it. Predictable. But their damage control wasn't working. By the afternoon, at least 5 more women had come forward with allegations against Julian. 2 of them filed police reports. Their statements were eerily similar to Maya's experience. Control, manipulation, abuse, all hidden behind the golden veneer of Hollywood privilege. Then came the financial bombshell. A leaked internal report from Whitmore Studios revealed decades of fraudulent financial activity. Ethan and his investigative team had uncovered evidence of tax evasion schemes, hidden offshore accounts, and illegal contract manipulations that had kept the company afloat while bleeding money behind the scenes. Within hours, the Justice Department announced a formal inquiry into Everett Whitmore and his studio. Stock in Whitmore Studios plummeted. Their biggest investors pulled out. By nightfall, Everett Whitmore stepped down as CEO of his own company. Maya and Danielle sat in stunned silence, watching it all unfold. Danielle let out a breathless laugh. "Maya, you just burned one of the most powerful families in Hollywood to the ground." Maya shook her head. "No, they did. They had done this to themselves." Maya had just made sure the world saw it. The biggest blow came the next morning. Federal agents raided Whitmore Studios' headquarters in downtown Los Angeles. Live news footage showed men in suits carrying out boxes of documents, computers, and hard drives. At the same time, an emergency board meeting was called. The Whitmores had no allies left. The shareholders voted to remove the entire Whitmore family from leadership. It was the end of an era. And then at noon came the final breaking news alert. Julian Whitmore had been arrested. Maya's breath caught in her throat as she saw the live footage. Julian, dressed in a dark suit, his hands cuffed behind his back, being escorted into an LAPD vehicle. He kept his head down, refusing to acknowledge the screaming reporters. The news anchor's voice rang out over the broadcast. Julian Whitmore, heir to the Whitmore media empire, has been taken into custody following multiple allegations of domestic abuse and assault. This arrest comes amid the collapse of the Whitmore dynasty, which has dominated Hollywood for decades. Maya covered her mouth as the weight of it all finally hit her. It was over. Danielle sat back, exhaling. "I never thought I'd see the day." Maya nodded slowly. Neither did they. The following week was a blur. The fallout from Hollywood Conspiracy rippled across the industry. Other studios scrambled to distance themselves from the Whitmores. Celebrities who had once aligned themselves with the family now rushed to issue statements condemning them. Even Vivian Whitmore, the mastermind behind the scenes, was forced into hiding. For years she had orchestrated the rise of her family. Now she was watching their empire crumble in real time. Everett Whitmore was indicted on charges of fraud and corruption. Julian faced multiple felony charges for assault and abuse. Whitmore Studios, once one of Hollywood's most powerful institutions, declared bankruptcy. And Vivian? She vanished from public life. Maya stood on the rooftop of Danielle's apartment, looking out at the Los Angeles skyline. It felt different now. For so long, the city had felt suffocating, like a trap waiting to close in on her. But tonight, it felt open. Free. She had spent years trying to mold herself into the version of Maya Caldwell that Hollywood would accept. But now, she realized she didn't need their approval. She had taken on the most powerful family in the industry, and won. She turned to see Ethan stepping onto the rooftop, holding up a bottle of champagne. "Thought we should celebrate," Danielle grinned. "Damn right we should." Maya took a deep breath, letting the moment sink in. They clinked glasses, the city glowing behind them. The Whitmores had built their empire on silence and fear. But now, Maya had made sure their voices would never be heard again. The sun rose over Los Angeles, casting a golden hue over the skyline. The air was different now, lighter, freer. The Whitmore dynasty had collapsed. Their reign of unchecked power and silent cruelty was finally over. Their studio was in ruins, their influence shattered, and their carefully constructed illusion of Hollywood royalty had been stripped away for the world to see. But for Maya, the fight wasn't over. She had won the battle, but the war for justice, the war against the system that had enabled them, was just beginning. The first thing Maya did was reclaim her name. In the weeks following the documentary's release and the Whitmores' downfall, she filed lawsuits against the false claims they had spread about her. With evidence on her side, the cases were swiftly ruled in her favor. Their attempts to paint her as an unstable ex, a woman scorned, fell apart in the face of the truth. But more importantly, she ensured that other women wouldn't have to fight alone. With the help of Danielle and Ethan, Maya launched the Caldwell Foundation for Justice, an organization dedicated to supporting victims of abuse in elite industries. Women like her who had been silenced by power, money, and connections. The foundation provided legal resources, therapy, and protection for those brave enough to speak out. And people did speak out. Inspired by Maya's fight, more victims of Hollywood's elite came forward. Directors, producers, actors. Those who had operated with impunity for decades were suddenly facing public scrutiny like never before. For the first time, there were consequences. Hollywood wasn't just watching history unfold, it was changing. Hollywood wasn't just watching history unfold, it was changing. Meanwhile, the final nail in the Whitmore coffin came from an unexpected place. Lucas Hayes, the CEO of Hayes Global, the very man the Whitmores had tried to manipulate through a fraudulent merger, had taken a keen interest in their downfall. When their empire collapsed, he swooped in and acquired what remained of Whitmore Studios. Not to save it, to dismantle it. Within weeks, Whitmore Studios ceased to exist. The studio, once a titan of the industry, was dissolved, its assets liquidated, its name erased from the Hollywood landscape. And with it, the last remnants of the family's power crumbled into dust. Maya stood outside the former Whitmore Studios lot, watching as workers took down the gold-plated Whitmore sign from the building's entrance. It was surreal. Danielle stood beside her. "You did it," she murmured. Maya exhaled. "We did it." She had walked away from the Whitmores with nothing but the truth. Now she was walking away with something much greater, her freedom, her power, and the knowledge that she had changed Hollywood forever. 6 months later, Maya sat in her new office. Not at a clinic, not in a hospital, but at the Caldwell Foundation for Justice, headquarters in downtown Los Angeles. The building had once been a property owned by Whitmore Studios, but after their collapse, it had been repurposed into a safe space for survivors. Maya leaned back in her chair, looking at the city through the glass windows. The past year had taken everything from her, her career, her reputation, her safety. But in return, she had built something greater than she ever imagined. Danielle stepped inside, holding up a bottle of wine. "Guess who just made the Forbes 40 Under 40 list?" She grinned. Maya raised an eyebrow. "Me? Damn right you did." Maya laughed softly. She had never needed Hollywood's approval. But seeing her name, not as Julian Whitmore's fiancée, not as the woman who took down a dynasty, but as a force for real change, it felt right. Danielle poured 2 glasses and raised hers. "To Maya Caldwell," she said, "the woman who burned an empire to the ground and built something better in its place." Maya clinked her glass against Danielle's, smiling, to never being silenced again. The city stretched before her, no longer a cage. It was a blank slate. Maya Caldwell was free, and she had only just begun. If you found this story compelling, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss more powerful stories like this. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if this story resonated with you, share it with others who need to hear it. Keep watching. There's another incredible story waiting for you right now. Click on the next video, and we'll see you there.